right. Well, welcome to Dr. Z PhD Interviews. This is a place where I interview interesting and inspiring people. Today's very special guest is Edison Rose Vincent. Edison is an incredible person. Edison is also a founder and a lead consultant, right, at Breaking the Binary. Yeah, Edison, welcome to the interviews.
Thank you, Dr. Z. It's great to see you. And, I'm just constantly grateful for you for your role in my medical transition, but also to being a friend and support over the years. So I'm excited to be here and just grateful for you.
Oh, thank you so much. So for starters, I would love to hear more about you, about maybe your gender expression, gender identity, how you identify, and just a little bit about yourself so that viewers get a little bit of a sense of what I'm talking about today.
Of course, of course. My name is Addison. I use they, them pronouns. I identify as trans and non-binary. And for me, it just means that I don't really identify as a man or woman. I'm something kind of other than that. I don't know if in between really makes sense, but I know some non-binary and genderqueer folks feel somewhere maybe like 50% this, 50% that, or somewhere in between. But I kind of feel like a third gender. I'm something outside of that binary. So yeah, I've been out since 2013 as non-binary and trans. I started my medical transition back in 2017 with hormone therapy. And I actually also started embracing my beard back in 2019 too, and really embracing and celebrating a more gender nonconforming expression. So it's been a journey, and it's been a lot of unlearning and relearning in the process, right?
For sure. What made you embrace your beard? What was it about it that just made you say, you know what, this is beautiful, this is amazing, this is part of who I am, this is part of gender expression that I see myself being. So what was it about it that made you embrace it?
Well, there was a point where after several years of shaving my beard constantly, that I felt like I was in a way doing these small little betrayals to who I've always
Hmm.
been. And I felt like I had to shave in order to seem more appealing or palatable, or for not only the community or for public to accept me as
Hmm.
a feminine person, but for my community to also accept me too. And so there was a bit of pressure I felt too from wherever I went to look and present my femininity in a
Hmm.
very specific way. So I felt like every time I was shaving, I was kind of doing these small little betrayals to myself and who I was had always been. But I didn't know what it would mean to actually grow out my beard, what that would mean for my expression, what that would mean for my femininity, would that invalidate it or would that amplify it? And I wasn't sure to how I would ultimately feel.
Hmm.
Would I feel dysphoric? Would I feel euphoric with my beard? So it wasn't until I felt safe enough in my relationship with Ethan, as you know, I've been with him for almost 5 years at this point.
Congratulations, recently married too.
Thank you. Yes, yes. And with that too, I felt like I had a partner, I
Hmm.
had a family, and I had a community, a close, tight knit, group of friends who I felt comfortable enough to be in to explore that part of myself. So with
Hmm.
2019, I grew up my beard, and when I looked in the mirror after having done some hormone therapy and having some breast growth and waist growth, and then looking at the beard too, for some reason it just all clicked. And it was wild. It was a wild moment for me. So since then, I've kind of just gone with it, and I love it now. I absolutely love having my beard with my body. I think it just makes sense for me.
I love how you decided to say fuck it, literally fuck it to the societal pressures. Yes, this is a channel where we can't curse because that's part of my language.
I love it.
I'm so glad that you're able to say it because a lot of people, as you know, actually do the opposite, especially people who identify as non-binary. Because there's no societal clues and there's so much pressure, some people would do the opposite in order to quote unquote fit in. So it seems in your case, having that safe space to explore that actually gave you what? Euphoria. It sounds like it gave you euphoria and it gave you a different way to relate to femininity, I would say.
Yes, I still feel I feel like my beard emphasizes my femininity. I feel like I have this beautiful feminine beard. Like that's just what it is. And I'm always gonna, and I still to this day still have people within the community. When I say the community, I mean like the trans and non-binary community, but also to the general public,
Mhm.
giving me their 2 cents on my beard and how I'm looking and stuff. And that's totally fine. That's their own story. That's their own trauma, right? But I think that for me, I've had to, just like you said, take that fuck it approach and just, we've only got one life. This is my body, my choice, and this is what makes me happy. This is what makes me feel aligned with who I've always been meant to be. So, yeah.
This is exactly why I adore you. You're like, if I could have a poster child, it would be you, for the way I just see life in general, because I agree life is so short and we pay so much attention to external things and external need for validation, and just seeing you being so authentic is incredible. I can really feel it. Now you are a founder of, and now right now you're founder and boss lead consultant on Break the Binary. So when I first went to the website of Break the Binary and started looking, I thought, what is the premise here? What is it trying to do? Is the goal here to just completely negate the binary, which personally I think will always have binary, and the point is not to invalidate it, but to add something else. So share a little bit more about the mission. What was the goal? How did you start breaking the binary? And what is the overall premise of it?
Yeah, so when I with my work as Break the Binary, I provide LGBTQ related training, educational services, and consultation services to businesses, schools, and organizations, only across the US at this point. It's actually international now. Thankfully with
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thankfully, with COVID-19, one of the upsides has
Mhm.
been that we've been able to connect with each other more closely now and remotely through Zoom and through
Mhm.
Google Meets and all that stuff too. So I've been able to connect with a lot more clients and provide these diversity and inclusion types of services now more than ever, which has been fabulous. But with that said, why I love this term of break the binary, why that's my Instagram username, why it's my company name, is because it's not about, trying to eliminate the binary
Mhm.
or telling people that being in the binary is wrong. That's not the message at all too with my work and with my persona. Break the binary to me means that we need to understand and get out of the mindset that the binary is the only options for how we can live. It doesn't have to do with just gender identity, the binary of being man and woman, but
Mhm.
also when it comes to expression. So feminine and masculine. When it comes to attraction or sexual orientation, so more
Mhm.
than just straight or gay. When it comes to sex itself, too, people still think that there's only male and female, but we forget that there's intersex people too,
Yes.
right? But it's not even just with those spectrums of identity within the LGBTQ community. It even has to do with thinking beyond the binary when it comes to being good or bad, right? Republican or Democrat, right? Getting outside black and white, right? We
Mhm.
have to think outside of these boxes that society is constantly trying to push us into, and to know that there's more to those binaries. There's more to life than just feeling you have to be limited to certain identities or certain ways of thinking. So
Mhm.
that's really the goal of Break the Binary, is getting people to think outside of the box.
I love that. On your website, and I'm going to list it below, Break the Binary website, there is a part of the website where it described in bullet points exactly what you just said. And I have to be honest with you, I've been working in the gender field for a while. And when I read it, it's the way you presented it, the way it is presented in much more broader terms than just binary only in relationship to gender. The minute you start seeing that this is not just about only gender, but just binary point of view toward just any kind of things, any kind of expressions, it suddenly almost like gives you an aha moment. At least for me personally, I was like, oh, this is perfect. This makes sense. I may even steal it for something, because it's so beautifully demonstrated. And I agree with you. There's so many things we tend to see through binary lens, and it really tends to narrow and create a myopic view of life for us when it doesn't have to be.
Yes, exactly. We just, I feel that a lot of us don't realize how much the binary has affected our lives. And when I say
Mhm.
binary, again, it doesn't have to do with just a gender binary, right? It has to do with a lot of different binaries in our life. And that a lot of that does stem from, and we have to look at history for this, a lot of it does stem back to colonization.
Mhm.
and stems back to Western imperialism too. And when we look at cultures around the world before colonization, those that have been resilient despite colonization too, we see that in a lot of cultures around the world that people have expressed themselves in third, fourth, fifth types of gender
Yeah.
identities and all different types of expression for centuries, for millennia
Mhm.
too. This is nothing new. Being trans, being non-binary, these are Western terms. But this
I
idea,
agree.
this concept of being beyond a binary of man or woman or male or female too, these are nothing new. These have existed for thousands of years. And so when we look at our history and we realize that there have never always, like that the binary has not always existed, then we can realize too that maybe we can also unlearn that binary and free ourselves of that too. I think my biggest reward, I think, going into doing my work and doing my type
Mhm.
of trainings is helping folks too who maybe didn't think they were trans, didn't think that they were queer, whatever, to slowly start to realize how maybe they've also been limited. Even if they don't identify as
Mhm.
LGBTQ, they've also maybe been limited in their expression as maybe a cisgender man or cisgender woman, or as a straight man or straight woman, right?
Right.
Getting people to really think about how this colonization and the results of colonization these years later have really impacted our ability to have a wider range in who we can be.
That's incredibly important, and I agree with you. I think that touching base on that, apart from people just realizing how limited they've been in their gender identity, but a broader scope of that is gender expression and gender role, which does not necessarily may mean that you are identifying as transgender or non-binary and need to transition or not, but it's just the way you move through the world and the way you may still identify as particular gender, but your expression may be so many other nuances. And I agree, it's so limited. And sadly for me, I only started to realize how limited my own gender expression has been throughout my lifetime, only in my late 30s. And it's really great that people like you exist because you're helping younger generation to have the vocabulary, to have the language to explain it. You are what?
I was going to say too, with that, just said when you're talking about younger generations, I feel like they're teaching me so much right now too.
Right? Yeah.
And just when I was coming out as non-binary,
Mhm.
just having she, he, and they as a pronoun option was like huge in itself. And now I'm learning that there's so many different types of pronouns out there too, and
Mhm.
how to really describe and use language to describe ourselves. And the youth are really leading that movement and really challenging people to think about language, to think about identity. And so
Mhm.
I'm constantly in awe of these next few generations too that are coming and really pushing gender to
Mhm.
the next phase. So I'm really happy about this.
I agree. I'm right there with you. Now you have a very active and incredibly visual Instagram account. I'm going to link it below for people too. And it is stunning. The photos you take, the way you post them is very interesting way of expressing yourself. And I've seen throughout the course of you being on Instagram many times where help Edison break out and get their account back because Instagram has shut down, break the binary. So what's going on there, and why is it that your account is being shut down?
Yeah, that is a great question and something that is still a bit of a mystery to me too. With my content, I am happy to post things where I'm in lingerie and I'm really showing off my body. And I think that it's really important. It's important for me to post pictures of me, with my body out and showing all different parts of my body
Mhm.
because of two reasons. One, I felt that for a long time I had to be ashamed of my body,
Mhm.
right? That I couldn't express it, that people shouldn't see it, or that I shouldn't be proud of it too, especially because it doesn't conform to the binary, right?
Right.
Because I've taken hormones, because I've got my beard, because I have my original plumbing, as folks like to say, right? Because I have all these things, I was taught to be ashamed of it too. And that really I shouldn't be expressing my and showing my body until maybe I've done a quote unquote complete transition, which again adheres to more of a binary, right?
Mhm.
But for me, I think that I post it because I want to be able to celebrate my body. And so
Mhm.
that is why I post the big things. But the second reason that I post a lot of things too is for representation and remembering that for me, as a kid, I never saw someone like me growing up. But if I had maybe seen photos or videos of someone like me growing up, maybe things would have made sense a lot
Yeah.
earlier. Maybe if my parents had access to my type of content earlier, maybe they would maybe feel a little bit more open-minded
Mhm.
to understanding why I was being gender nonconforming as a kid too. So I do this for representation. I hope that other people will, connect with it as well. But ultimately, it's really just for me to celebrate my body,
Mhm.
feel good in myself. Now, why I get reported, or why my Instagram gets shut down. Last time that my Instagram was shut down, my TikTok was shut down, supposedly someone at Facebook told me that it was because my content was flagged as a spam account, and that's why it was shut down. I'm not sure why that would happen, but
It's a very big account to be a spam account, and you have a lot of followers. So,
but
and what you're posting is a lot of people posting body images in different type of lingerie all the time. There's a lot of body positive individuals on Instagram.
well, I think that for me, I've kind of come to a place where I've been in a few different types of situations where I've had multiple people comment on my posts, report me, in mass amounts. And so I'm wondering if maybe that also happened too. Maybe
Mm.
a lot of people were being encouraged to maybe flag me or report me as a spam account. Maybe that's why it happened. But it's unsettling sometimes for me when I do get online harassment because, and I'm not sure if other non-binary and genderqueer folks relate with this too. Maybe they do. But for me, going out into the world, going outside and stepping outside my house, looking the way
Mhm.
that I do, it's scary. I have a lot of anxiety leaving my house every
Mm.
single day too, worried about what people are going to say, what they're going to
Right.
do, how I'm going to be treated because of the way that I look. Now, I do live in Los Angeles, which is, a more liberal, progressive type of city. And we're during a time where we're going out with masks on, so people don't really see all of me when I go out into public.
Mhm.
But I still do worry, and I have a lot of anxiety before and during the pandemic about how people are going to treat me. So when it comes to online presence and I receive that type of hate in like waves, whether on TikTok or on Instagram too, it's really unsettling because I like to go online because it's a safe space. I like to go on there because it's a place where I can really be unapologetic. I can really show myself,
Mhm.
and to get that type of hate sometimes is really unsettling. However, with all that said, even with all the mass reporting, even with tons of hate comments and threatening messages too on Instagram and TikTok,
Mhm.
I would say that I have about 5 times as many positive messages, positive comments, people who are reaching out because they want to offer support, because I've connected with them in some way, or because they're thankful for my pictures or thankful for my,
Mhm.
so I feel that for all the times that I can focus on that negative stuff,
Yeah.
I have so many more reasons to focus on positive things. There's so many more positive messages and comments that I get. And so I'm always grateful for my community for showing up for me in those ways.
I'm very sorry to hear that you're still having an element of anxiety leaving the house, which is, it saddens me, especially in LA too. But that's the reality, and we have to address the reality, right? And then to hear that social media is one of those things where it's a platform, but people a lot of times don't realize it's still it's like your home, but on a more Wi-Fi level out there. And it doesn't mean you can come over into my house and shit all over the place, right? So um, always block people and whatnot. I'm sure you do that, but it's really unsettling when people can't just have tendency to, if it's not for them, to move on. If it's not content that resonates for you, move on. If this is not something that does anything for you, why take the time of your day to sit down and write an IC comment? And I know it can hurt, but I'm glad you have a lot more positive people who are supporting you. And I think your account personally is just incredible, absolutely incredible.
Thank you, Dr. Z. When I talk to other activists and I talk to other people who also receive this online harassment, I think that something that comes back to me is remembering
Mm-hmm.
that when I was younger, before I came out as gay, before I came out as non-binary and trans, before all those times, I was in a place of a lot of pain. And for me, I would direct my pain towards other people. I
Yeah.
was sometimes a bully. I was sometimes mean. I would sometimes treat other people in mean ways, and that was because I was coming from a place of hurt. So when I see people online and they're saying horrible things in the comment section, and they're saying them, in a public way too, especially when they're commenting, not just privately messaging me, but
Mm-hmm.
and looking for those likes from other people too.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's coming from a place of pain for them. And this is again, I go back to remember that colonization has impacted everyone, and it's
Yeah.
impacted everyone's mindset, not
Mm-hmm.
just of each other, but ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone comes onto my post and they see it as threatening for some reason to what they've been taught,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder too that maybe it's even threatening to maybe their own identity.
Yeah.
And maybe they're worried too that if they do agree with this or if they support this, then maybe other people would
Mm-hmm.
see them for who they really are to someone like me, possibly. They go to a place of pain, they go to a place of hurt, they go to a place of anger, and so they lash out. So for me, when I see these negative comments, when I see these negative messages too, I it's not that I laugh about it, but I
Sure.
just kind of take a moment to reflect on again just how much our culture and our society has impacted the ways that we see ourselves and see each other. And I hold room and I hope that people like that will have the opportunities, have the spaces, have the resources to heal, but maybe even to find themselves.
You have the empathy, and that's huge, because you're right. I mean, as a psychologist, I can tell you that it's projections. It has nothing to do with you, and they're just how we are. We all know, we all have had those experiences of commenting, or maybe we don't comment, but we're thinking those thoughts in a moment, and those thoughts have more to do with us than with the person that they're directed at. But it's still painful to be a target of that. Now, I always say to my viewers on YouTube that non-binary identity is oftentimes the most difficult identity in today's world, primarily because there's no societal cues. There's no societal cues for that identity. And when people go out, they get constantly misgendered either as one or another binary. And I use analogies that if you go out there and you take in, a boxing hit internally to your psyche every single time and you come home bruised up. So what advice do you have for people watching in terms of navigating the life as a non-binary individual?
Wow. Wow. I think that the biggest advice or the best advice I could probably give to other non-binary people. Wow, there's so many things that come to mind. First thing that I think about is rest. Try to
Mm-hmm.
get as much rest as you can, just as you said, when we're going out into the world, and whether it's online or in person,
Mm-hmm.
we're getting misgendered, we're getting invalidated, we're being policed constantly, whether it's by the general public or by our own communities or families or friends. It's so important for us to take the moment to just rest and recuperate, get that energy back to and honor ourselves too. So whether that's setting boundaries and not going out to those events too, or not feeling obligated to have to educate people all the time too for free, right?
Thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Right.
There's nothing wrong if you want to keep your family members or loved ones informed. It does not have to be everybody. It's not your obligation. Thank you for saying that. Yes.
I think, that for me, that's why I started my business too. I think that I was being exhausted, whether in my nonprofit roles or outside of work or online, wherever I was going, people were always constantly asking me to define non-binary, to do a trans one, non-binary 101 for them, to
Mm-hmm.
break down everything. And it was getting exhausting. And so that's why I started my business, because I wanted to start getting paid for that work that I was already being expected to do, right? So I think that for folks, getting them to letting folks know it's okay to rest, and it's important to prioritize ourselves in
Mm-hmm.
a world that's often designed against us, right? So that's my first big piece of advice. I think my second piece of advice would be really to surround yourself with people who really understand you and have no judgment or no shame that they'll put on you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I have a close knit friend group of probably about 8 to 10 people, and I know that I can call on them for anything too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's who I constantly see. That's who I hang out with most of my time. And they're also non-binary and trans people too, who understand, who get it, who celebrate folks beyond the binary, right?
Mhm.
You know, I don't have to explain myself to them all the time. So find that close-knit friend group, whether it's your chosen family, biological family,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like. You know, I would say surround yourself with people who really understand. And I would say the last thing I would say in terms of advice would be, wow.
Get your chocolates and eat them.
Yeah. I guess my last piece of advice would really just be
Yeah.
to just say yes to yourself, to be unapologetic.
Mhm.
I think for me, I have that anxiety. I have that worry, right, when I go into the world and even navigate online spaces about how people are going to react to me. And at the same time, right, there's this complexity, right, of also not letting that hold me back from being who
Mhm.
I am, right? I can still have that anxiety sitting there, that feeling,
Sure.
right? But at the end of the day, I need to be who I am. And so I encourage non-binary folks out there too, who are watching this, to just be you.
Mhm.
And if that means wearing that outfit that you've been thinking about wearing, or growing out your beard, or shaving your beard, or whatever it be, or if it's taking hormones or exploring
Mhm.
transition in those ways too, or pursuing legal transition and getting your name and gender updated on your gender markers, on your IDs too. Whatever that looks like for you, whatever you're curious about and trying out, go for it. Be you. We only have one life. And yes, the world isn't always designed for us.
Mhm.
Sure, there's always going to be people who don't understand or even hate us. But don't let that stop you from being you. And I can only say that when I just started that journey for myself and I was saying yes to myself more often, I've had no regrets to that. So
Thank
be,
you. Is that it?
yeah, that's all.
I
Go
didn't
for
want to cut it.
it.
No, I just thought that I really appreciate and respect how you're not brushing over it. You're not packaging up in a nice, fluffy petals, right? You're saying it how it is. You're saying, look, I still have anxiety. It's not easy. I'm still worried about my safety. It still doesn't feel good when I get negative responses, even though I know they have nothing to do with me. It's still difficult because I'm still a human being and it hurts.
Yes,
And yet I still every day make a choice to go out there because that's me. And otherwise, life is just not worth it.
you got it.
And I
You
think
got
that's really important message. Yeah, I really appreciate that. As somebody who identifies as non-binary, and especially having such an expressive gender expression and gender presentation, today's, there's a lot of internal politics within the community, right? There's a lot of people who disagree that word transgender is too broad, we're clustering too many identities underneath. Especially, I would say a lot of people who strictly identify as trans-binary are, I noticed, are getting quite a bit upset about other gender expressions or gender identities in the middle of a spectrum or somewhere off, but not so far at one end or another. Have you experienced any of that backlash from especially trans-binary identified people?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, especially as a feminine trans and
Mhm.
binary person too, I often get within the community, I get a lot of backlash from transgender women.
Mhm.
And you know, going into this conversation, I think it's super nuanced, it's super complicated. And I go into those kind of conversations too with the understanding that these conversations are often by older trans women, especially trans women of color,
Mhm.
who have often had to navigate so many different systems. You know,
Right.
we live in a world where trans and non-binary identities are more known and more aware of, and people have that education and that access and representation of.
Mhm.
So if we're talking even 10, 20, 30 years ago,
Mhm.
right, completely different world. So, you know, for me, I understand too that when trans folks, trans, you know, women and men maybe are upset with non-binary people, it's again coming from a place of pain. It's
Mhm.
from a place of trauma even too, and an
Yeah.
understanding too that for a long time, and even let's say even to this day, right,
Mhm.
that trans people need to look and express themselves a certain way in order to access employment, access housing, to access, get insurance, to be able to also have
Mhm.
partners, to have friends, to
Yeah.
have people who accept them too, right? Because looking transgender, looking non-binary too, didn't get you a lot of places for a long time. So I understand that it's coming from a survival response. It's coming from a place of like, non-binary people don't exist because
Mhm.
we fought so hard to be who we are
Right.
today, that for folks to not want to adhere to the binary, to say fuck it, right?
But you're not saying fuck it.
But is what they're saying, right? It invalidates my experience, everything that I've had to go through. So I
Mhm.
hold that. I hold that. And I understand where they're coming from with that too. But again, what I do in response to a lot of folks who do try to invalidate my identity because they feel that my identity is invalidating their identities or experiences, I again remind us again about colonization. I think
Mhm.
about longer histories too. I think about how the binary has been so violent, the gender binary in particular, to different people throughout the ages too. And that even for trans people, trans women and men for so many years too, who felt they had to adhere more to a binary, that maybe they also are coming to a place where they're realizing maybe I was actually non-binary
Mhm.
all along. Maybe I felt pressure within my community and by the public to
Mhm.
adhere to more of a binary for survival purposes, to be able to access resources, to be able to live, right? And so I've had many conversations with trans women and men who are older than me, some in their 70s too, who told me that if they knew that non-binary was an option, if they knew that there was that language,
Mhm.
they probably would have identified as non-binary instead.
I met those people as well.
And so for me, again, it's a complicated, nuanced conversation, I think,
Mhm.
within our community. And it doesn't mean that non-binary people are going to go away. And so those trans people, I think, are going to have to work on their own shit in order to better understand how to embrace this really
Mhm.
important and integral part of our bigger trans and non-binary community. But I also see that there's just a lot of people who have a lot of pain. And so again, I'm just holding space and seeing that we have a lot of work to do as a community, and that's okay.
I commend you on being able to not personalize those experiences, because it can be very difficult not to, and can be very incredibly difficult to hold a space, because I agree, it comes from this place of survival. It comes from a place of where people had to work their transition. And it's challenging when they look at non-binary people. For some reason, they see it or equate it to as this person does not give a fuck about gender or binary identities, and that's not the case. It's just happens to be their gender expression. And yeah, so I commend you on being able to hold a space. It's not easy. Talking about all of these hardships, I know that on Instagram you are a huge proponent of self-care, but you're a huge proponent of what I would call real self-care. We're not talking about here a box of chocolates and a glass of red wine and a bubble bath, although all of those are nice, but they're given. In my opinion, they're just given things you got to do. Why is self-care so important to you, and especially so important for you to be such a proponent of it on a social platform?
Wow. Well, self-care is important for me because it's something that I still struggle with, right? It's something that I think a lot of people still struggle with. But I realize it's so important because if I don't keep my cup full,
Mm-hmm.
then I can't really rely on other people to sometimes even fill my cup up. So I have to take care of myself
Mm-hmm.
in a world designed against us often, so that I can just make it to the next day. And I think that that's so important. For me, self-care, like you were saying, isn't always about that box of chocolates or that massage, although those can be also great self-care things too. For me, my biggest self-care tool has been more of an emotional and mental kind of aspect. And in that sense, is all about addressing shame.
Mm-hmm.
We as trans and non-binary people carry so much shame around our identities and our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that we've been taught since we were born, even before we were born, right? If we had gender reveal parties or people were announcing our genitals to the world before we were even born,
It's
right?
true.
already that shame being instilled
Mhm.
on us about who we're supposed to be. And if we don't align with that, then there's something wrong with us, not the world, right? Not that gender assignment. It's something
Mhm.
wrong with us.
Mhm.
So for me, my biggest self-care thing too, in order to really show up for myself, has been to really address that shame. And if I keep telling myself that there's something wrong with me, that I'm the problem, that me being non-binary or trans is
Mhm.
inconvenient to other people, right? Then I'm not really showing up for myself. And if
Yeah.
I'm not showing up for myself too, then they win. That's how I kind of see it. Like colonization, the binary win.
Mhm.
So we have to take care of ourselves. We have to unlearn that shame and know that it's not us that's wrong. It's just the way that our society has unfortunately been developed, the way that we've been taught as a culture to see gender, to see expression, to see sex, see attraction and sexual orientation, but so many other things too. So when I unlearn that shame and I'm able to see myself with more compassion and more love too, then I can treat myself a lot better too. So that's what I hope that other people can relate to.
So what is the cornerstone to your self-care? What is the cornerstone? What are your top 3 cornerstones that help you deal with shame and guilt?
Therapy, 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 therapy. So I'm in individual therapy, but my husband and I were also in couples therapy. And, as two trans and non-binary people, like we come with our own shit, right? And that totally affects our relationship too. But thankfully, I tell folks too that you don't need to start therapy when you feel like you're at your lowest point or when you have
Mhm.
a breakdown or when you're on the
Exactly.
verge of divorcing or something like that too. Therapy can be more of a preventative tool. It can be something that you can use ongoing whenever you want to start too, as a way to start managing your emotions, be able to work through that shame
Mhm.
and stigma and those traumas too, but to be able to better take care of yourself. So therapy, 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 therapy. The second thing that I do as well too is, I think that for me, being online is important,
Mhm.
but my online presence is a mixture of two things. One, having and following people who are trans and non-binary for that
Mhm.
representation, so that way I can slowly start to unlearn in
Mhm.
my head that trans and non-binary people are a minority, or
Mhm.
that we are rare, or that we are the exception, right? But to know
Yes.
that there are so many trans and non-binary people out there that come in all different shapes and forms. Again, there's no
Mhm.
one way to look trans or non-binary. So putting all that representation on my feed continuously helps me unlearn and relearn that I deserve a place in this world. But I also have those boundaries on my social media too, with trying to be on there too much,
Mhm.
because again, then I can start getting into seeing messages and comments from people who can be horrible. So I want to have that boundary too
Mhm.
with my social media. So therapy, social media stuff. But I think that my last thing too is also working on my physical body. And so when I say that, I go to the gym,
Mhm.
right? I get massages. In our new place that we just moved to, we have a pool here. So trying to do things to take care of my physical
Mhm.
body and to kind of become more grounded in my body, because I feel that, and I'm not sure if other people feel this way, but for me, for a long time, ever since I was a kid, I coped by
Mhm.
dissociating, by
Yeah.
just not being here. And so I was not in my body ever.
Mhm.
And because I had that such a disconnect from my body, I feel like that also maybe played a role in why it took me, in my head at least, a while to
Yeah.
start my medical transition, to be able to also express myself in a way too, because I just never felt home in my body because I was just never present living in the
Mhm.
world. So doing these physical activities brings me back into my body. Yes, it's good for working out and getting healthy and stuff, but really is a great way for me to just come back to myself. So
Such
those,
important top 3. I love those top 3. And I'm so glad you touched base on dissociation because it is such a common defense for gender diverse people as a way of coping with dysphoria they feel, especially in relationship to the body and in relationship to how others see them. So very, very common, even post-transition, whatever there is for individuals, dissociation still might continue, and grounding is very important. So I appreciate you touching base on that. Talking about unlearning, I want to read a quote I snatched off your Facebook page. And the quote says, unlearn the lies you've been taught to believe about yourself and embrace your truth. It's a very powerful quote.
Yeah.
How
I
did
love
you came around? Yeah, how did you, is that something that, is it your quote?
No, I think I found it online. I'm totally spacing on who said it, but it's been my Facebook banner for many years now at this point. And I think that for me, it's a constant reminder too, like I said, that we've been taught so many lies about who we're supposed to be. And again, that shame
Mm-hmm.
around that if we don't fit into those roles, if we don't meet those expectations by our parents, our friends, our society and stuff, to that there's something wrong with us.
Right.
And again, just kind of relearning that that's not the truth, that we are perfect the way that we are. We deserve love and celebration. And that I think that even for us that are defying those roles, we're
Mm-hmm.
even worthy of even more celebration. So that's a constant reminder for me about having to unlearn that shame and just embrace, like you said, embrace that truth, embrace who we've always been meant to be.
I think it's a very powerful quote because it's relevant to just anybody. Has doesn't even have to do anything with gender. It is so relevant to just the things for being fed and being told, just about being a person
Mhm.
and how to live as a person, especially in a Western society. And I love that word unlearn, right? Because I always challenge myself to question everything and to ask myself, where do these paradigms or ideas come from, the social constructs that we constantly perpetuate about what it is being a particular type of person. And I think people seldom question them. So I love that banner. It's a powerful banner. You newly married, as we said earlier, to Ethan, who I will be also interviewing. I'm excited to, so stoked to interview both of you. So you're newly married. And when I saw that I've known you and Ethan married because I've been following your Instagram, but I thought it was really interesting in terms of marriage and marital institution. Marital institutions are still, for the large amount, are pretty binary institutions, and the whole premise of marital institution is built on binary concepts. And so, what made you decide to legalize your marriage? And do you feel that by legalizing your marriage, you're kind of fitting into that binary concepts?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. I think that for us, to be completely honest, at the time that we were getting married, we were looking more at the benefits that come with marriage. And so I think that for a lot of folks, we see marriage as, again, just that binary structure where it's just,
Mhm.
it's this thing where men and women, or at this point now too, there's same-sex couples too that can get married, and it's all about love and love and love and love, right? And of course, you have to have a big fancy wedding. For us, it wasn't really that purpose. We are already in a relationship. And I think that getting married, after even we got married, we were like, nothing's really changed. It's kind of just the same. Like, this is
Sure.
our relationship, and that it's just a legal document. And really just came down to really the benefits of it too. We were both, navigating the immigration process too,
Mhm.
looking at even to insurance benefits with being a married couple too, and how we can share that. And that just made sense for us. And so for me, it's really looking at the benefits of this legal institution that's only available for a long time to heterosexual couples, right?
Mhm.
But now it's available to a lot of different types of people. And yes, it's still a very binary structure in itself too. I remember, I went through it, but I think that for us, it really is looking at the benefits. And so something just to think about too, about how, I think that the benefits of marriage should be available to people who don't necessarily want to maybe get married as well. So
Yeah.
just some things to put out there too. But that's really the reason why we ended up getting married. It wasn't because we needed this formal type of thing to solidify our love.
Sure.
It was already there. We just really looking for those extra benefits.
Okay, so very, very pragmatic approach. I do like that. It's kind of the same reasons why I ended up tying the knot after 10 years of being together, the same pragmatic reasons. So I totally understand them. So you and Edison been together for a while. Has your gender evolution in any way affected your relationship?
Wow. Yes, I would say yes. When me and Ethan were first dating, this was back in December 2016, January 2017, so almost 5 years coming up, um, I was presenting myself without my beard. I hadn't started hormones either.
Mhm.
I was still, of course, identifying as trans feminine, non-binary. And Ethan at the time had been on hormones for maybe like a year or so. And he didn't have a lot of facial hair. And he actually had this kind of like more of like an emo scene kind of haircut at the time too. And so we both looked very different than how we looked today.
Mhm.
And at the time too, Ethan identified strictly as a trans man. And I was non-binary coming to our relationship. And I was the first non-binary person that he had been in a relationship with. And he was actually my first relationship in general. So we were very new to everything coming into our relationship.
Mhm.
And over the course of, I would say, the following 2 to 3 years, we would talk with each other about, okay, like what does gender mean, and what does medical transition look like, and how does that relate to our identities. And so it was with Ethan that I started taking my hormones. It was with Ethan that a few years later, right
Mhm.
before we actually got married, I started growing out my beard for the first time. It was in our relationship that he felt comfortable enough to start exploring a
Mhm.
non-binary identity. So he now identifies as trans masculine non-binary. And even playing with his gender expression more too. Before he was very rigid with his masculinity, and now he wears pink, and he dyed his hair pink. You're gonna see it actually in a little bit when you interview him. He wears a lot of different fun things, and so being in a relationship, I think that we've felt so much more comfortable
Mhm.
to express ourselves, to explore gender, to play with expression,
Mhm.
and to find ourselves a bit more too. Not meaning that I think that a lot of people go into relationships hoping to find your other half,
Yeah.
but we've gone to this relationship being two whole people supporting each other and being a team and
Mhm.
supporting each other and finding ourselves as well. So it's been this beautiful journey.
Do you think that it was the support and um, the support and love and the type of relationship that you and Edison had from the get-go that created the safe space for both of you to explore further, you not only gender identity but also gender expression? Do you think that was kind of a keystone?
Yeah, I think that that was something that had to be there from the beginning. I mean, our first few times that we were seeing each other were long, like hour-long conversations. We were talking about our experiences, our genders, but also remembering too that even though we are two trans and non-binary people, we are not just trans and non-binary people. So even talking about our immigration stories, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
Canadian and Ethan is Peruvian, talking about family structures, to talking about childhood relationships, friendships and stuff too, and how that impacted our lives, talking about hobbies. And so I think that having this relationship where it started off with open communication, with vulnerability, with, understanding and compassion too, I think that set the foundation for this now
Mm-hmm.
5 year relationship that we've had, where we're able to really see each other and understand each other. Me and Ethan are at this page now where we're always thinking the same thing all the time. We can read each other's minds. We know what's going on. And I think that we just have this type of relationship where we know that we can try things out. We can be who we are. We can explore new parts of ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and not have that judgment or shame or stigma either.
Mm-hmm. What is it like to navigate life as a non-binary couple? What are the challenges?
As a non-binary couple, well, I think that for Ethan, I think the way that he expresses himself, a lot of people think, and assume that he's a cisgender man, maybe a shorter cisgender man, right? But everyone still thinks that he's a cisgender man when he goes out into the world. But when they see me and they hear me the way that I
Mhm.
am too, it's a little bit different. So I think that going out into the world, Ethan has kind of taken on this role of being a bit more protective of me whenever we're going out to public, supporting me, being in front of me, trying to like make sure
Mhm.
too that I'm protected, because I'll be more of a target of verbal harassment
Yeah.
than he will be. Um, so that's kind of what's been like going out into the world. And I know that there's been times where that harassment has, been like water off a duck's back and it's been fine. And there've been times where that harassment has really, really hurt me, really hurt me.
Mm.
And so he's been there for me just to hold me and support me in those moments
Mhm.
in particular. And to remind me too that I'm worthy of love and that I deserve to be celebrated. And that again, those people have their own shit that they're working through and it has nothing
Sure.
to do with me.
But
So
it's still painful. It is
it's,
still, I mean, I am a psychologist, right? So I probably know human behavior and human psyche more than a lot of people without psychology degree. And I have YouTube channel, and it's always hurts when I get comments that are not constructive at all. And I'm all for constructive discourse, please. That's the whole point. But it's always hurts and it always will. And so I know it's first and foremost incredibly painful when you get that. So does that, it must be very difficult for Ethan to be able to see the anxiety it may cause you, or how difficult it is for you and how painful it is for you, and him even sometimes maybe not even being able to protect you at all times.
yes, yes. And I think that this has kind of been, in a way, a great process for us to work through, with understanding that we can't always protect each other. We can only be there to support each other with becoming more resilient. And I think this has been a lesson for us to, as we're actually approaching parenthood. So right now, I'm in the process of trying to go through fertility preservation. Unfortunately, I found out that even after 9 months of being on hormones, or off of hormones, that I'm actually still not fertile. But we are looking into possibly one day adopting or having a
Yeah.
surrogacy. I know that Ethan's talked about even wanting to carry. So
Hmm.
we'll see how this all goes. But I know that 4 or 5 years down the line, when we actually start having kids and starting our own type of family, um, that I know that we'll have to understand that even with our kids, we can't protect them from everything.
Yeah.
We can try our best, but we also have to know that they're going to go into the world, they're going to get hurt as well, but they're also going to be celebrated. And we can only teach them how to be resilient and how to
Hmm.
try to protect themselves. But again, at the end of the day, too, I think that what we're learning with even how I'm navigating this world, that our kids are also going to navigate that too. So it's all a big lesson. It's a big learning moment too. But at the end of the day, we have each other to support each other with these journeys, um, and to just uplift each other when those things happen.
Was that a difficult decision, if you don't mind me asking, for you and Ethan to think about the family and kids, in a sense that knowing that it is already so challenging? And I'm obviously ecstatic to hear that, in spite of knowing all of that, what you're going to say, yes, and still. But nonetheless, was it a difficult conversation, discussion that, it's going to be tough? And it's going to be also tough how your and Ethan's gender expressions and gender identity may impact kids down the line.
Yes. Well, I worry too. I think my biggest anxiety is being my fabulous self and my kids not accepting me, or being embarrassed of me, or worried about what other kids or teachers are going to say to at school. Like
Mm.
that's my biggest worry, is that um
Mhm.
and I think that again that goes back to that shame, right? That
Yeah.
shame that for some reason me being me is an inconvenience to my kids, an inconvenience to where they go to school, an inconvenience, right? So that's my biggest anxiety that I worry about too. Um, and at the same time, I just try to balance it out with remembering that I'm going to be an amazing parent. Ethan is too.
Mhm.
And hopefully our kids love us no matter what, right? But again, these are things that we're not thinking about until probably 4 or 5 years down the line, just right now,
Sure.
preparing for that. And I think it's been a little bit overwhelming to think about becoming parents, because I think just it's been only around this time, these past couple of years, that we're finally seeing trans people like biologically starting families.
Yes.
And it's so refreshing, but it's also so scary because it's such a new thing in a way too. I do remember though, I think one of my first times hearing about a trans person was a case of Thomas Beatty. And Thomas Beatty was a trans man back in,
Mhm.
he's still around, of course. But I remember, I think about like 13, 14, maybe even longer ago too, him being in the tabloids as pregnant man, right? And I was just so
Mm-hmm.
fascinated by this because I thought it was a cisgender man who was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, as this little kid who did not have any understandings about transgender identities or that I might be non-binary or trans, I was so excited at the time because I was like, oh, maybe it's a possibility of me being pregnant then, right? So I remember that years ago, but it isn't until now that I've really had the understanding and to see that trans people are able to start their families
Yes.
too biologically.
Yes.
And of course, there's always adoption, there's always, fostering, but, I think that it's just really exciting to be in this time where there's so many different possibilities for how trans and non-binary people can start families of their own.
I think you and Ethan are going to be phenomenal parents, knowing both of you. Honestly, I gotta say, I don't think you have anything to worry about. And you have to remember, you're gonna be the first ones who are gonna be shaping up your kid or kids' paradigm and worldview of not only their lens through which they see gender, but their binary lens and everything else. You're gonna be shaping it up. So I think that's incredibly important, and we need more parents like you, to be honest. Otherwise, what are we looking forward to? Do you think that we will ever have genderless society?
No, no. And I don't think that this should be the goal either. I
Mhm.
think that, I tell people that I would love to have a world that is not genderless, but genderful.
Mhm.
So a world where we have not just men and women, but of course we have non-binary folks, genderqueer folks, agender folks, pangender folks, just and those are just some terms, right? But I want to see a world where we have people of all different gender identities expressing themselves in all different ways. I love to see bodies of all different types, right? I don't think it's about eliminating gender for everybody to look genderless or androgynous in some way.
Mhm.
It's just that I would love to see a variety. I'd love to see diversity and for folks to know that you don't have to look a certain way, to get jobs, to get
Mhm.
healthcare, to get,
Right.
acceptance, but also to find love too, or have relationships. Like, I want folks to know that you can look and be however you want to be and for that to be celebrated. So that's the world that I'm striving for is a diversity, a plethora, a mosaic of gender identities, not just everyone to be one thing.
You and I the same. Do you think for that to even happen, one of the things that needs to happen is for gender not to be aligned and married to a biological sex, to be divorced from biological sex?
Absolutely. I think that for sure too. I think that genital reveal parties need to stop, right? I don't
Mhm.
want gender reveal parties. Genital reveal parties need to stop as a big thing. And two, I think that there's just so much pressure put on babies too. Again, once they're born, that you're supposed to be a certain way. And
Mhm.
so I think that people need to really, I would love to see more parents play with gender with their kids too, until their kids maybe want to have, maybe choose one, or maybe continue to want to play with gender
Mhm.
over their lives too. I think that a lot of it too is that we end up putting, I think aspiring parents want to put their own expectations, their own hopes, their own desires, their own dreams onto their own kids.
Mhm.
And then what ends up happening too is they end up stifling or limiting their own children too with their gender identities, or it could be even careers, it could be even religion, it could be a lot of different things, right? We know this, right? So I think that parents need to be a bit more understanding, a bit, and hold a bit more room
Yeah.
for understanding that their kids may not align with what they want them to be.
Mhm.
And that is okay. But I think that it first starts off with making people more aware of possibilities of being trans and non-binary,
Mhm.
so that they can play with that too with their kids a bit more early on.
I hope so. I hope we're gonna move towards that for sure. To sum up our interview, what are right now, where are you at in terms of your life? And with the COVID restrictions are picking up here again in LA and things are getting crazy. What are you the most looking forward to?
Wow.
Oh, that is an incredible sigh.
you know, During COVID-19, a couple things have come up for me. I would say one is that I've missed maybe going out and being at events, going to the bar, going to parties. and not having anxiety around getting sick or
Mm-hmm.
tracking something. But I should say not but and during COVID-19, being home more often has been nice because I felt like I had so much anxiety going out, again, because of how I was worried about people would treat me. Again, still being unapologetic and being me, but still also being anxious.
Sure.
Being home has been nice because my anxiety has been able to like relax a little bit. I can be home, I can be at the comfort from my phone or from Zoom, and know that I'm safe, physically safe. And to have that comfort. I know that's a big privilege for me, being able to be at home and feel safe there and have the resources that I need. Um, and that's just the reality of for me at least, what it's been like during COVID-19. Now, slowly things are opening up. We've been starting to go back to the bars, we've been starting to go to parties, seeing our
Mm-hmm.
friends more often now. And and I've actually felt like I have a lot less anxiety going out and just more pride, more joy, more gratitude going
Mm-hmm.
out and feeling like, this life is short. Things could happen at any point too. Why am I letting these worries and these fears about what other people are going to say or do control who I'm going to be? So I'm kind of, in a way, grateful for this time because it's allowed me to do some healing, to work on
Mm-hmm.
myself, to be able to recuperate, get my energy back, and now to be able to go back out into the world and feel a little bit more safe. And to be honest, wearing masks has not only been good, of course, for health and for not just self-care, but for community care, right? We
Mm-hmm.
wear masks not to protect ourselves, but protect each other.
Sure.
But it's also been a great kind of barrier for me because if I'm going out to places where I do have maybe a lot of anxiety, maybe the grocery store, the gas station, wherever it
Mm-hmm.
be too, and I have my mask on, people don't look twice, and I can know that for me, like, this is me, right? I've got this. I'm still living
Mm-hmm.
apologetically, but I've got a little, it's like one less thing that I have to worry about with
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. So I would say that it's just been interesting to see how COVID has affected things.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I'm so stoked and so excited that I got a chance to sit down with you. I think what you had to share is going to be so incredibly helpful to a lot of people who identify as non-binary, because there's so many challenges with not only navigating the world as non-binary identity, but also just being visible and visibility and being able to just live your life to the fullest. And it's a struggle for people, and the struggle, it's out there and it's true, and we're not trying to sugarcoat it. But nonetheless, life is struggle nonetheless. So in the very least, you have to choose to be authentic you. Thank you so very much for sitting down with me and taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Z. You're amazing. And I really, really appreciate, again, your time, your support. And, I wouldn't be who I am today without you either. So thank you so, so much.
Right back at you.